Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Steelers Draft Talk. I'm your host, Derek Bell. With me is my good buddy, Nick Martin. Before we get into anything today, just please make sure you go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/all Steelers Talk. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. We got a lot of NFL draft related content coming to you guys as we head into draft season. We're full in swing. This week, I've been kind of covering the Shrine Bowl virtually. Unfortunately, not in Vegas, but virtually. And then Nick's been down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. So busy along with, Steven and Noah and those guys too. So busy week for our group, but we got plenty of good content for you guys as we move forward through the week. Nick, first off, let me hear about Mobile, man. How's your first trip down there?
Oh man, it's been one hell of an experience. Just first off, like the city itself is like really interesting. It's I've never been down here before. The
Yeah.
roads are really narrow, and but the experiences of being able to interview players is just so great. Like I loved the media day we had here today. Just being able to interview those guys and just getting up close one on one, seeing which guys are just like well spoken, which guys are just kind of like disinterested a little bit in the interview, and sometimes they've had way too many interviews prior, so they get a little worn out, and it's really understandable. But yeah, the experience, just being able to talk to players, talk to a bunch of analysts, bunch of coaches, just really cool.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's awesome. That's awesome time. I'm still looking for my first Mobile trip. Unfortunately, it just hasn't worked out for me schedule wise the past couple of years. But it's a great thing. Tons of networking opportunities. Get to go down there and watch a ton of high level football play. Even like you mentioned, interviewing players, man, that was so cool. Like when I got to do that last year, we went down and covered the combine in Indianapolis. Just being able to interview the players and like really ask a bunch of like in-depth, detailed questions was awesome because I felt like I was learning on the job, and it was a really cool experience. And even like looking back on it, it was really cool, like draft weekend, because I asked George Pickens like a ton of questions at his podium. So like that was really cool that I, kind of got an early interview before he was even in Pittsburgh. So but yeah, that was cool. Who's been probably your favorite interview so far? Like, do you have anybody that's had a good answer to a question that you've asked or anything like that?
I honestly think it's two players, and Julius Brents from Kansas
That's my
State. Like,
guy.
yeah, man, he is so long, he's so tall, but like he gave so many detailed answers on like tendencies and what he looks for, what separates his game, and just like he was just really in depth with his answers. Like I really appreciated a lot of that from him. But Michael Wilson, he just came off super genuine in his interview.
Had a
Just
good week
very,
too.
yeah, very well spoken. He got a little overshadowed on day one, but from Puka Nakua, but day two without Puka, he just exploded. Like he was a really good interview today, and I was really happy he went off today because I think he's a really good player, honestly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I've also noticed that too. At least when I was down there at the combine last year, that was a big thing too. Like if you actually talk, ball with these guys and avoid kind of some of the generic questions, like they'll actually open up and give you like better answers too. So
Yeah.
I think that's cool, especially for like people like you and me that are really trying to broaden our knowledge of the game and also kind of like to get like a little bit deeper look, kind of behind the curtain. So it's kind of some good stuff. I did want to recap just some Shrine Bowl stuff. The Shrine Bowl week was awesome, man. It's concluded. Practice is concluded. Game, I think, is tomorrow or Friday. But the practice week was awesome, man. You could tell the level of talent at the Shrine Bowl this year, I think, was a notch above what we've seen even in recent years. And, you look at the guys that have came out of the Shrine in the past couple of years, most notably last year, like Brock Purdy, starting the NFC Championship game. Tyquan Thornton was, I think, a top 50 pick. Who else? Jack Jones was a big contributor for the Patriots defense this season. So it's kind of interesting too. The Patriots got the coaching staff nod in the Shrine Bowl, and
Yeah.
they drafted all those Shrine Bowl guys last year. But
Miami got Skylar Thompson too. Could play
yeah,
a lot of significant
yeah,
minutes.
that's another guy. They had a lot of talent last year, but I feel like this year was a step up, and I was really excited about going through the practice film. Just some quick winners of guys who I thought played extremely, extremely well. I think the winner of the week, we went into it knowing really about, Zay Flowers, A.T. Perry. Those are probably the two headliner names for the week. But I really think that the winner of the week was Keitrell Clark from Louisville. He's a guy that we talked about a little bit on the pod. He's mostly a nickel guy. It's where he played last year at Louisville, but he got some experience playing outside. And it's hard. Like, I want to stress this too. It's hard being a DB in one-on-ones because those drills are not heavily weighted in your favor. Like, you're trying
absolutely.
to lose those reps. We've talked about that. But Clark, man, not only did he win a bunch of like one-on-one reps and get his hands in the passing lane, get his hands on football, he stood out in team. And granted, this isn't like full on contact, but like he looked more aggressive than everybody else on the field. What I mean by that, he blew up a couple screens. I think he stopped 2 or 3 different screens in team sessions in the backfield. He made plays at the catch point, getting his hands on the football, but he also like made plays that ended up in interceptions for his teammates. He had an excellent rep where, he didn't let the receiver cross his face, flipped his hips, got in front of the ball, dropped the pick. It ends up going through his hands, but then it floats right back to his teammate and they run it back. So I thought that Clark, guy that really, really helped himself this week. He looked just super fluid in coverage, all the movement skills you could ask for. And I think I don't know, have his measurements right in front of me, but he measured in exactly what I think Louisville listed him at, which was kind of key. So usually we've already seen some of the measurements from the Senior Bowl and from the Shrine Bowl that are drastically different than what they're listed as on their team.
Way different. But Travius Hodges Tomlinson was.
Yeah. And we didn't. Yeah. That was a bummer. Oh, that was a bummer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. It's always cool when you're aware of these guys and you're like, man, there's definitely something here. And then they go to these all-star games and they show out because it's like, it makes you feel good about the process for sure. Mm-hmm. Just some other guys I thought that were, kind of winners throughout the week. I already mentioned Zay and A.T. Perry. Those guys look like they were supposed to look. And we've talked about them a lot. We will continue to talk about them because they're bigger prospects. But I wanted to throw a couple shout outs to some lesser known guys. Liberty's Demario Douglas. I'm always really hesitant when I see these, 5'10", 5'11", 170-pound receivers because they're designed to win these one-on-ones. But it is worth noting that no one at the Shrine could cover this dude. I mean, it was remarkable. I mean, he was making guys fall on the turf like incredibly quick, really fast. He had some big games last year. He had 100-yard games against Wake Forest, a 100-yard game against Arkansas. So the level in competition, that jump from this week and big games last year, like didn't really seem to affect him. So he was another guy that I liked. And then just 2 more defensive guys who I thought both really helped their stock. Another Louisville guy, Yasir Abdullah, he was great in teams. He had a couple sacks. Of course, you can't really touch the quarterback in these all-star games, or practices anyway. But he had a couple sacks, really displaying, that bend, that ability to rip through contact. And then Jose Ramirez, I thought he probably the best like front 4, front 7 guy at the Shrine this week. He was winning in a myriad of different ways. Offensive tackles were having a hard time with him. Even when he wasn't necessarily getting a sack, he was constantly having the quarterbacks like step up in the pocket. So, there was a lot more guys, and I'm going to have hopefully a full recap of like, other winners. But, those were some guys that impressed me. I'm not sure if you got the chance to really check any of the Shrine stuff out this week with you traveling.
I've mostly just seen bits and clips, but for me, I feel like the receivers, A.T. Perry and Zay Flowers, they definitely should have been down here just from watching some of the receivers because I actually did hear that Zay actually was invited by the Shrine Bowl first, and he decided
he stayed committed.
Yeah, he stayed committed, which is really interesting because it goes back to his Boston College days, and people thought he should have transferred. And like that loyalty aspect, I almost wonder if teams are gonna look at that a little bit. But yeah, A.T. Perry and Zay Flowers, I really think they would have stood out here just as much. And it's not to say the receivers have been bad here. It's more so that I think it would have led to a lot more depth overall at the Senior Bowl, which I think is really interesting. The Shrine game it's starting to catch up to them a little bit, and I think it's cool. Competition, breeds excellence in my opinion, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. Another guy that I thought was really good through drills was Starling Thomas from UAB. That dude, he moves. He moves really, really well for I think he's only listed about like 5'10". I think that's around what he came in measured. But he was sticky in coverage all week. And I thought particularly the first like day or two of practice, I haven't gotten through all of the day 4 stuff. But the first like 2 days, man, he was winning a lot of reps. So I liked him as well. But yeah, I think you're right about that. Zay did have I believe that Zay was invited to the Senior Bowl. I think that he had already committed to the Shrine and didn't want to, go back on that commitment. So, which I get that's cool. He did what he was supposed to do. I feel like from what we saw of him, I mean, I wasn't really expecting anything more than what he went out there and did. He still looked like the best receiver there, I felt like. But another guy too that probably won't end up. I don't know if he'll end up on my winners, pending what the rest of day 4 tape looks like. But Jaden Hazelwood from Arkansas, you seen him play?
I have not, but I've seen people been buzzing him up on the timeline. I don't want to look at it until I actually look at the practice film, honestly.
Yeah, man, it's really interesting. So he had some really, really, I mean, brutal drops. I mean, just brutal drops. He had a deep ball that he got plenty of separation on down the field. It was a little bit, the throw was off. It was underthrown, and he tried to adjust to it, and like it ended up hitting his chest and bounced off the turf. He had another drop on like a dig route over the middle of the field that was just like kind of like, what are we doing here? But this dude was open all week long. And one-on-ones, he was creating a ton of separation. And he measured in over 6'2", 213 pounds. So this is a big dude.
Yeah.
And he was creating a ton of separation. He was a guy that I wasn't really super familiar with headed into the week, but I thought that he helped himself just because he was constantly open. Like most of the corners had a lot of difficulty getting on him. He looked like a really good athlete. So he's a name that I kind of jotted down of like, okay, I need to go back and watch some of this dude's film. So, yeah, that pretty much wraps up the Shrine Bowl, kind of some of the quick hitting winners. So far, 2 days through Senior Bowl practices, who have been some guys that have impressed you so far?
I think Keanu Benton and Carl Brooks are the standouts along the defensive line. It's really interesting with Carl Brooks because I'd watched a little bit of him coming into this week, and I saw that Bowling Green would line this 300-pounder up as like as an edge, as a wide 9 in a 2-point stance, and I'm just like, this is crazy. And the thing is he moves way differently than he should for a 300-pounder. Like he's fluid, he's bendy, and he's been winning one-on-ones pretty frequently overall. Like just swimming over guard. Like his quickness is just really hard to account for. Like you don't see guys who are that big be able to move the way he does. And another guy is Keanu Benton from Wisconsin, who you mentioned strictly before the podcast about how you wanted to see him. And, he's a great scheme fit overall for the Steelers, especially.
Sure.
But the big thing with Benton is I've just been seeing him stringing moves together. I've noticed him use a club rip. He bull rush and then convert that into a push pull off the when a guy tries to settle down and anchor off him. Like he's extremely way more impressive in pass rush than I thought. And I want to give, context. One-on-ones is not everything, especially, the D-line is favored, the wide receivers are favored, and these types of drills. And, you want to see them perform in team drills, but, and team scrimmages and stuff like that. And I do think Benton and Brooks have both stood out in that regard. In those team scrimmages, my bad.
Yeah, no, I definitely think both of those guys, just from the little bit that I've been able to see, it's kind of difficult because I've been trying to wrap up Shrine Bowl stuff and keep a little bit of tabs on the Senior Bowl stuff. I'll probably get through all the Senior Bowl stuff sometime next week. But what I have seen so far of Brooks is, them giving him the opportunity to line up inside over opposing guards, like in those like one-on-ones and stuff. You immediately see that quickness, and he's going to be able to kill people with that quickness. and that bend through contact on the inside of the line. And I thought that the one move that kind of stood out to me that I saw, I'm not sure of who was at guard, but he had like a two-hand swipe, like a double two-hand swipe to keep his chest clean for a
Yeah.
sack, where he kind of like bent the corner around at the very end of the rep. And then Benton, just the way that he is moving at 312 pounds is
And he's
it's
got like
different.
that. Yeah, he's got like that thickness to his lower body. Like he
Mhm.
generates some serious power off the snap. It's pretty.
And
It's
he's
pretty
winning. I mean,
ridiculous.
he's won in a couple of different ways. I've seen, club swim. I've seen, rip moves. I've seen just about anything. I've seen a swipe. Like, it seems
Yeah.
like he's winning with a myriad of different moves, and that's what you like to see from defensive linemen in these drills. Trying to see what they have in their repertoire so far. But Benton's a really fun watch, man. I actually, while I was eating my breakfast this morning, I turned on some tape from last year against Ohio State. It was a little bit of a rough game for him overall, like definitely not the best tape I've seen from him, but he had a rep later in the game. They were trying to like run like wide zone away from his side. He was playing one tech and he's trying to come across the line of scrimmage, and Paris Johnson is trying to reach block him. He's trying to get in front of him. And Benton literally just takes Johnson like underneath the shoulder pads with one arm and just slings him to the turf. And I'm like, what in the world is this dude on? I know he's got like, what did he measure in at 33, 34-inch arms?
Yes, 34-inch arms, which is really ridiculous for a
Yeah.
guy that size.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about generating some power, and but not just in his lower half, but those arms, and he can use them, basically as levers to dictate where blockers are going, and it's really impressive tape. He's got some really really fun tape, and I definitely think the Steelers are going to be interested in a player like that. You mentioned the schematic fit. Wisconsin, they do some similar stuff in their fronts. We've seen Wisconsin guys obviously come into the Steelers defensive scheme and impact right away. TJ Watt's obviously the most notable one, but we've even seen
Yeah.
Isaiah Loudermilk get some run. I was hoping we were going to get another Wisconsin guy last year in Leo Chanel, but it's all right.
Same.
I'm just I'm a little bit salty about it still. But from a Steelers perspective, like anything in particular you've noticed since you've been down in Mobile, like maybe guys or position groups are paying a little bit more attention to, or anything like that?
I think Tomlin is just it's been really interesting watching him because he almost is like wanting to play like he's like in the middle of like
I
all of
love that
these
about him,
drills,
man.
and he is just right up there watching. Like there was a guy who got absolutely ran over in one-on-ones. He goes up to the guard and he's just like coaching him up and stuff, and I just love Tomlin's energy. And Grady Brown, the defensive backs coach, he's been really involved with the defensive backs. I'd say Tomlin. It's really funny because Tomlin is a former defensive backs coach, and he
Mm-hmm.
says, "I like watching the big guys," and I'm just like, man, you were a defensive backs coach back
Yeah.
in the day. So it's really interesting. He's really paying attention to the O line, D line, and I think that's been the biggest aspect, as for sure. And he was talking it up with Jacorian Bennett, Maryland corner, and how he loves his Maryland guys. And
Yeah.
Bennett was
indeed.
talking about how he's like, he loves his Maryland guys. He loves talking to us. And that's
Yes,
always
it's
really
definitely a
cool.
connection we're gonna have to follow up on. As soon as we get down to the combine and stuff. I'm wondering, if how much interest there's gonna be with Bennett. He's a really interesting prospect. I got to finish my eval on him. So, I've seen some good reps from him though on my timeline.
Yeah. The big thing I want to see is I just want to see him trust his technique more. And he even mentioned this to me. Like he'll be perfectly in phase, and then he gets really grabby at the
Yeah.
top when he shouldn't. But I saw him make an excellent play in a scrimmage. It was actually in one on. It was no, it was in scrimmage. It was in team scrimmage. Trey Tucker has a switch release off a wheel, and he ends up going under the pick, goes with him perfectly, plays the ball in the air, incomplete pass. It was just great rep from him all around. Like I just saw some really good things from him.
That's awesome.
And
Yeah, I
speaking of,
mean, well, one more thing, real quick. Like just
yeah,
with having Devon Witherspoon back out, like we were kind of like that was my initial thing. Once we saw Witherspoon back out, was like, okay, which of these, because there was still a lot of talent at the corner position for the Senior Bowl, but we didn't have that first round kind of guy that we knew, what they were going to bring to the table. I was interested to see if anyone else was going to, take that spotlight and just try to run with it.
Yeah, I honestly think the guy who took the spotlight, at least especially today, was Caillou Kelly, who just seemed to be around the ball just so consistently. Like I swear he had like 2 dropped interceptions in like one-on-ones, and he had 1 dropped in a team drill, and he had 2 interceptions on the day. And I'm just like, he should have had like 5 interceptions today. Like, this is unreal. Like, his zone eyes, he was just working really well. He was staying in phase. Biggest thing I wanted to see from him, because I had gone through a little bit of his tape, and I thought he would open the gate a little too early from an off coverage perspective. I just thought he would bite way too much, but he has the movement you want to see. He has the size you want to see. I think he has all the traits. He just has to put it together. But definitely from a zone alignment, he's going to be ready in that regard. I do think he has to work a little bit on his man coverage, though.
Yeah. I know, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure it was Blue Kelly who played. I think he played Drake London fairly well last year when they matched up. I'm pretty sure that's who it was. But yeah, he's a really interesting player. I saw that Noah put a piece out on Blue Kelly as well on the site. So if you guys are interested in that, definitely check that out. I'm sure it's good. You mentioned Tomlin. I want to hit back on that. I got the chance to go to the Kentucky Pro Day and then the Cincinnati Pro Day, which are fairly local to me. But Cincinnati, they were loaded last year. They had Sauce Gardner, all those big names, Desmond Ritter. Of course, that was what everybody was kind of there to see was, Ritter and like how much of the Steelers organization was sent down to see his pro day because they were really interested in quarterbacks last year. But when they were going through the drills at the pro day and like the testing numbers and stuff, same thing. Tomlin was glued in on the linebackers and the defensive linemen. It was so cool. Like just seeing him interact with Darian Beavers, like through the drills. Like Beavers is intense, dude. He was an awesome dude to interview. I interviewed him at the combine and at the pro day. He's an awesome dude. He was one of my favorite guys to talk to last cycle, but he real intense. And Thomas sitting there that like back and forth, like during the drills, they were putting him through like the weave drill where you had to come forward, catch the ball for the pick. And every rep after that, he was talking to Tomlin. Tom was like hitting his chest and everything. And, it's so funny because, being there, I see all these other different organizations. There's a bunch of head coaches there. All the head coaches are mostly like, relaxed guys. Tomlin's in the thick of it, man. Like he's in the middle of like what seems like every drill. And I just thought it was cool. And I think that's part of the reason why when you hear these guys, when they come into the league, have such a respect for Thomas because, these guys do get the chance to interact with teams throughout the process, even if they don't get picked by the Steelers or whatever organization. So he kind of like builds that trust or builds that rapport with them early on. And I think it's cool how involved he is. He's a football junkie. You can definitely tell. And he's excited about his job. And I definitely appreciate that. So what are some things that you're looking forward to seeing the rest of the week? Any particular matchups? Maybe some guys that got off to a little bit of a slow start this week, or just guys that you want to see continue their momentum?
Honestly, in terms of continuing their momentum, I think the corners is the biggest thing I wanted to see because like Julius Brents, I thought day one he was just extremely impressive with his fluidity and just pinning receivers to the sideline. I thought Tyreek Stevenson just was extremely sticky. The thing with Stevenson I noticed was he's not as fluid as a hip turner as you think, but he's just really good at keeping contact on you. So he's a little bit like Artie Burns in that regard, where he's just. Except I would just say
people in the pod might have just rolled their eyes.
They may have just rolled their eyes, but I do like Stevenson in terms of his technique. I think he's very disciplined. I think he's very sound. He has really good zone eyes. Riley Moss, I thought he was really good day one. I thought he slowed down a bit day two. Like I thought he was getting beat across his face a good bit. And I think the big thing I want to see was the long speed from him. I know Moss is extremely fluid. I want to see him be able to get back in phase with guys that have him beat, on that secondary release and whatnot. Michael Wilson had a really nice post route against him. Just unbelievable player. It was just good on good, but one-on-ones, They favor the receivers, not the corners. And another thing I wanted to see, quarterbacks.
It was like a little bit of a rough start, I saw.
It was a very rough start on day one. I think Jake Haener was the only guy who was serviceable overall. I thought Tyson Biggett had put some pretty good stuff together on day two. But Jaron Hall and Clayton Tune, the rest of the guys, I just thought they're just kind of there. They're just not really making enough plays. They're just not stringing that consistency together, and I think that's a big problem, like, overall. I just want to name out a few more shout outs real quick because I want to talk about Tyjae Spears. I want to see this man. I want to see this man absolutely kill it in pass protection. I saw him get run the freak over by Aubrey Miller Jr. They run it back, and he had a really nice rep. But the thing with him, and this was no like mystery to me or anyone who had watched his film at Tulane, is that he is extremely gifted of a runner. He has way better contact balance than you'd expect for a guy his size. Runs between the tackles extremely well, but he is just so explosive. And then you combine his fluidity, change of direction. He's able to just string cuts together like it's nothing. So he just he just completely destroys guys' pursuit angles because he can go east to west in just such a flash. But he can explode uphill. Like, it's crazy with him. He looks like one of the top tier backs in this class just based off what he can do as a pure runner. And there's ability as a receiver too, but he has to be able to pass protect. That's the big question. His film in that regard at Tulane, it's not pretty. And that's why I just was really wanting to see. I like seeing him fight. I think he showed really good fight out there, and I think that's the big thing. And overall, like, the guys up front that are allowing him to do that, John Michael Schmitz has been awesome. He's looked like the best center by far.
He's looked good.
Yeah, no,
he's looked good. I think I may have maybe too low on him, and just based on what I've seen this week, I'm not trying to let the All-Star game stuff sway my opinion too much, but I do think there were some reps that I've seen floating on my timeline already where I'm like, okay, maybe I need to go back and watch a little bit more.
Yeah, no, he was just planting guys into the ground, but also he was moving out in space on screens.
He's just great zone in a zone scheme. He's gonna be a good player.
Yeah,
I think I have some concerns otherwise, but I think if you're a team that wants to run a lot of like zone stuff and get him out in space, like he can do that.
I completely agree with that. The biggest thing I wanted to see with him was, like, could he be nasty, just plant some dudes into the ground? And he's just been like, he's got that, he has a wrestling background. So, like, he really can just absolutely just, when he gets his hands on you, it's really tough to just disengage from him. And that's just what I've noticed from him. Like, he's just been extremely, like, he's put together two great practices back to back, and I'm just been impressed with them. And other two names, Osiris Torrance, just impressive grip strength anchor, and I thought Matthew Bergeron has been smooth with his feet, and he showed a good anchor. He's been moved around a good bit. I think he's a little too tall to be a guard. I think his leverage gets a little, like, it gets used against him a bit. But he definitely has that versatility inside out, which is good to see.
Yeah. Bergeron was a guy that I really wanted to see how his one-on-one reps, particularly against some of these edge rushers down at the Senior Bowl. I was hoping, some of the bigger names wouldn't have dropped out. But Bergeron's film is really good. I do think he struggles a little bit to anchor against more powerful guys, especially like when he gives up his chest, the recovery ability. That's something I wanted to keep an eye on this week. So it's good to hear that he's played well for the first couple of days, though. That's very intriguing. Just to go back and hit on a couple guys that you talked about, Tyjae Spears. The pass protection really was the one. It's the missing part of his eval. I think that his hands are fine. Like, as a runner, you talked about explosiveness. The ability to string moves together is it's not the most important thing. Vision. It's not up there with vision in terms of running back traits. But when you talk about guys that are going to be significant contributors at the next level, and I think that Spears has the ability to be like a highly complimentary back, and like if you're running a committee, he does that extremely well. There was a play against Cincinnati that I found the other day of him like breaking. He broke. They were running like inside zone, I think, and he has a good hold, but he gets like 10 yards up the field, and he breaks one dude off. He falls down, breaks another dude off, breaks another dude off. It's like boom, boom, boom. So expressive, so explosive, and the way that how agile he moves in space. He gets to that top gear quick. Like I know everybody's been tweeting that one play in the team drills. But he gets to that top. He made 32. I think he forced 32 missed tackles. Pro Football Focus is what they had him charted as his last 3 games of the season. And that's granted, that's not against maybe like top 5 defenses, but I mean, it was against Cincinnati. We know about USC. They got some talent over there, but they were terrible last year.
They can't tackle.
Yeah, but I mean, he was making guys just look silly. So that's the thing. Can he pass protect? What I saw on film was not necessarily that he was shying away from that. It's just there were times where I didn't know if he knew his assignment, like pre-snap. They were guys coming from depth, blitzers, like just not picking them up early enough, getting late to the hat, and I think that's problematic, especially like when you're talking about a young back. Like you got to be able to pass protect, or you're not going to get on the field. Like that's something that I talk about religiously on Twitter. People send me these backs, and they're like, "Look at what they can do with the ball." And I'm like, dude, if you're not a dominant runner, you have to be able to pass protect. You have to be able to hold your own, or you're not going to get on the field. I think he's got to prove that.
That's the thing. What's tough with me though is there are traits that I see on film with him that could make me think he could be a dominant runner.
Yes, but he looks like it at times. At times, he looks like he's a special dude.
Yeah, it's a really tough debate with him, but like I'm just glad he showed up like over 200 pounds at the Senior Bowl.
The measurements were great.
Yeah, it was like he looked rocked up even on film, but like it was always encouraging to see. The biggest thing, pass protection. It's what makes money on third down. Joe Mixon doesn't catch that many passes in Cincinnati because he just can't pass protect because they don't leave him on the field on third down that's consistently enough.
Yep. And then just one more guy I want to hit on, just because Brents was a guy that I talked about a little bit. I think it was like our second episode, I think, Steelers Draft Talk. But, man, the film, it's a little inconsistent, but, dude, the traits and tools are there, man. If you are a defensive backs coach that is really confident in your ability to coach a guy up, I don't know what else you would want in a player. I mean, he came in 6'3" and some change, right? Long arms, like can really run. He's athletic. I think he's really fluid for his size too. Some of those taller corners, you think of them being a little bit tight-hipped and unable to kind of turn. He's pretty fluid for his size. And just from some of the reps that I've seen already this week, I think he's held his own. And I'm excited that he's playing well because he's definitely a guy that I think probably will end up going higher than I think maybe most people even anticipated just off tools and traits alone, especially if he, kills the draft process, which he's off to a good start doing it. There was one rep in particular that I tweeted out a couple hours ago that I thought was just superb. I'm trying to see if I can find who the receiver was. Let me see. I can't even tell, but he just does an awesome job. It's one-on-ones, but he does an awesome job. The receiver takes an inside step off the line of scrimmage, and he, takes a leverage step, remains, he's motoring out, he's staying square, stays square for like 5-6 yards before this dude even gets into the curl route. And I'm like, man, this is too easy.
I think that was against Darius Davis.
Is that who it was? Okay.
Yeah.
I can't even find it. I don't know why I can't find it right now. But yeah, that was an awesome rep, man. Like because you got to think about it, man. When the receiver, especially in those one-on-ones, they do all that dancing and all that other stuff. You make them take those extra steps, and with how long he was taking to get in his route and how he threw off the timing of it. In a real live game, that ball's not coming over there. Either your pass rusher is going to get home, or that quarterback's going to move off that receiver because he's taking too long to get open. So I thought Brent has had a couple really good reps that I've seen so far. I can't wait to dive into the Senior Bowl tape for him. But
correction, it was Dontavian Wicks, by the way.
Dontavian Wicks, okay,
yeah.
Wicks a talented player. I know he didn't have a very good year this past year, but he was like draft Twitter loved him last summer.
He had probably the most rep like in terms of like just embarrassing a corner. I think it was against Darius Rush. He just kind of like nods, gets in his blind spot, and he just kind of like leaves, and everyone was just like, "Oh,"
Yeah, you like seeing
he
those
was.
ooh and ahs at the All Stars.
Yeah, it's yeah, that was really impressive to see. Like I'm gonna have to get caught up on Wix's film in terms of like watching his 2021 versus his 2022 to see what went wrong. And
It went wrong for everybody. It wasn't just him. It was Brennan
Brendan
Armstrong.
Armstrong was
Everything,
terrible.
man. Oh my gosh, everything just fell apart for that Virginia offense. So
Who knew Tony Elliott wasn't a good
yeah, we've only been saying that for how many years? But either way, I digress. I think it pretty much does it for us this week. But really appreciate your guys' support on the channel. Please make sure, again, like, subscribe, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk, or wherever you get your podcast. Nick have coverage for you guys along with Noah and Steven for the rest of the week in Mobile. So be sure y'all follow them on Twitter. Make sure y'all are following up with their recap stuff on the site. And we will holler at you guys next week. Peace.
Peace.